In comics, there's a debate that takes place of classic takes on a character and bold new takes on a character. And the problem is that those two aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, in many cases, the best runs of a comic have had bold takes on a character, but have also maintained a classic feel or kind of the core elements that make the character work. So why do we treat them as separate? And what are some examples that we can give where, we try and choose one or the other and we wind up achieving neither? Hey everybody, this is Perch. One of the dynamics, and in fact, it's one of the big kind of complaints or areas of conflict that I see a lot between fans and creators, is this idea that first of all, the whole argument gets kind of strawmanned on both sides, by the way, where the creator will be doing something new, and it's a take on the character, and maybe the fans aren't particularly on board with it, and maybe it's a combination of, the fans just haven't given it a chance, or maybe it's just truly not a take people are interested in. Both things can be true, and there's been different examples of both. But believe it or not, you have to go back a long way, but there were people, today, John Byrne's run on both Fantastic Four and She-Hulk are considered these epic runs. But when they first came out, when they first kind of made their appearance, there were critics of the Fantastic Four run, and there were even more critics of the fourth wall breaking She-Hulk run. Like, this isn't good. When are we going to get classic She-Hulk, etc.? And these are examples of people who very quickly decided they didn't like the character, and so they had a knee-jerk reaction to it. And then over time, people now look at it fondly. So that does happen. And I think it's important for fans to recognize that sometimes the things that we don't like right away tend to age better than we think. And so, it's just important to keep that kind of in mind while we're reading our comics. That maybe, is this a reaction to something new, or is this truly a reaction to a comic that we don't like? Because both things can happen. But more kind of almost to the point here is that there seems to be a dynamic at times of this battle between classic and a classic take on the character. Like, I wish the comic could just give us a classic run. I've said the same thing myself, by the way, that I would like to see a more classic take on the character and the situation, and that, there's a lot of good stories to be told there, but we're always trying to do these kind of bold new, defy expectations versions of the character. And the challenge is that when we're saying defy, a lot of writers kind of want to make their mark on a character. They want to do something new that hasn't been seen before. That's part of the in some cases, that's why the writer is picked, because they've done a pitch that brings something new to the table. And you'll hear Tom Brevoort and others talk about how they really look for creators who can bring something, quote unquote, new to the book. There's nothing wrong with this idea of bringing something new to the book, but it's important to recognize that you can still be true to the character. You can still give a, quote unquote, classic or honorable version of the character in the story and have it be a bold new direction. When John Byrne took over Wonder Woman, he definitely took a kind of, quote unquote, bold new look at the character. There are aspects of that was definitely, not like George Perez's run, but still good. And the character was recognizable. It wasn't like John Byrne had to, kill off Diana and bring in somebody new, or just, basically kind of redo the whole character and what makes the comic the comic. That's to date, that's been the go-to for a lot of creators of that they need to actually, kind of upend the whole status quo. They need to take the main character out because the main character has been around for a while and just replace him with something completely new and different. And that's not necessary. As we've seen in the past, we know that that's not a requirement to having a good comic, having a successful run. You don't have to do that. You can still do something new and transformative and keep the classic takes on the character. It's that kind of desire to, it's that word, defy expectations. Defy expectations has come to mean, completely rip the character apart and do something completely unique. But like I said, in most cases, it's not necessary. You can do a new take, and still, for example, when Chris Claremont came on the X-Men, and we got introduced to Wolverine and Colossus and Storm and these new characters. That was a radical shift. It was brand new characters. It was something we hadn't seen before in the X-Men. But at the same time, the comics still did feel like the X-Men. It still felt like that kind of out of. In fact, if anything, Chris Claremont leaned more into those tropes that Stan Lee and others had taken care of in the past. It's still, even though brand new characters, brand new environments, it still had the same feel. And I think that's part of what goes on in some cases with comics is that there's an attempt to change the kind of whole tone of the book. So if, for example, you had to make it more contemporary, to make it more like, maybe something that's popular. So, I've mentioned this before, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it's a Scotty Pilgrim effect. It's we're going to make not Scotty Young, Scotty Pilgrim. My brain's all mixed up. It's that Scott Pilgrim effect where we want to have a slice of life story. We want to have something that's a little nostalgic, a little tongue in cheek, a little bit different of kind of maybe what we're used to in some cases, and that's that's so we're going to turn, say, Teen Titans or X-Men into Scott Pilgrim. It's like, oh, Scott Pilgrim appealed to a younger audience. Let's have the Scott Pilgrim version of that book. And that's certainly a bold new direction. It definitely doesn't achieve a classic take. And it's often rejected because people can't see the characters that they recognize in those books. And the trap becomes, it's like, well, you don't want us moving forward. It's kind of the counter argument. And again, that's a straw man argument. It's not the case. Now, again, I don't know. Maybe that is what some fans want, but I'll use the counter example. We've seen runs where they do a classic take on the characters. They do a I don't know, lack of a better word, by the numbers, that nothing really happens, nothing really evolves. It's the characters as we've always known them, frozen in amber, and that's what we're getting. And those runs tend to go down very poorly as well. They're just not, there's no interest to them. There's no hook. People do want their comics to have kind of big moments, big changes, big, new members being added, people taken away. Again, a lot of people compliment the Chris Claremont run as being kind of godlike for the X-Men. But take a look at, everywhere from kind of pre-Dark Phoenix saga through when Claremont left the title. Look at how much the roster changed. Look at how, powers are taken away, powers are brought back. Characters came and left, and Xavier's there and he's not, and Magneto's running the team. You got villains turning into heroes. You have a complete turnover of a lot of elements in that book. So it's completely inaccurate to say that Claremont was doing a classic take on the book, or he was doing he was giving fans kind of exactly what they wanted. In many cases, he was giving fans a lot of things they didn't know they wanted, or they had no idea, and things that are brand new. But the tone of the book, and that's why I keep coming back to it, the tone of the book stayed the same. So it was a bold new direction. In fact, I think many of Chris Claremont's issues kind of put that on the cover, a bold new direction. For Christ's sake, they had the X-Men invisible to technology and moved to Australia at one point. I mean, that was that was a change. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's great as long as you're able to balance the two. I think leaning all the way into just classic takes on the character means that nothing really moves forward, nothing really changes, and the sales reflect that people tend to tune out. At the same time, if you do a completely bold new direction and you don't maintain any of the existing tone, people also tend to tune out because it's no longer a book they recognize, and it doesn't bear any resemblance to the thing that they've enjoyed all these years. So that's the back and forth that really needs to take place. And I think there's a lot of examples over the years of people who have done it right. Again, I think a lot of the different, there's a million, big and small. There's a lot of examples of Batman doing kind of bold, striking new direction, but still maintaining the Batman feel. Batman had Robins come and go. You had all kinds of things go on. You had good runs, bad runs. You had a Denny O'Neil run that was, great. You had a lot of different parts where big things were happening, but it still felt like a classic Batman book. Didn't feel stale. And then again, you have lots of examples, especially more modern, because unfortunately, I think it's stunt promotion of books where it's like, we need to do a bold new, completely defy all expectations of what people knew and thought with this comic. And they kind of change the comic into a different comic completely. The characters are different. The the whole behavior, everything is different. I think this is, obviously there were people who knocked the Bendis Iron Man with Riri Williams too much. I mean, that the anger over that stuff just got to be, you couldn't escape it for a while. But part of that was it didn't feel anything like an Iron Man book. And I think in some cases, if you just created a brand new book like Riri Adventures, um, you would have had far less of backlash because you wouldn't have had that battle over bold new direction and classic take. When Rhodey came on and was Iron Man for a while, it still felt like Iron Man. It maintained the kind of the tone, the classic feel of the book, even though they're going in a completely new direction. You had a new person inside the armor. And that's the difference. That's how both pieces should come together. But in a lot of cases, when we talk about it, people really struggle with being able to kind of separate the two, or they make it all about there's path A and path B. And I think the thing that we should recognize is no, there's actually there's quite a few. There's path A, B, and C. There's classic, by the book, for lack of a better word, boring take on a character, and then there's completely upending it and doing something radically different, and then there's bringing them both together. And I think it's the bringing it both together that really is the magic, and not impossible, but it does take some planning and some work to make sure you're achieving that goal. Anyway, what do you think? Classic take, bold new direction take, bringing them all together. Where do you fall in all this? Does what I'm saying make sense? Does it fit? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, follow me on Facebook or Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.